Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today entitled What Niagara's Foreign Trade Zone FTZ Point Means for Business. It's Sarah Webster speaking here, knowledge broker with Niagara Connects, and we also have from our team Executive Director Mary Wiley joining us and Sarah Johnson acting as chairperson in the meeting room. So the audio for this presentation is provided through the phone line, but please do make sure you've also clicked the web link in your connection details email that you received so that you can join us in the online meeting room to see the slides. All of our participant lines are muted during the presentation to help us cut down on background noise, as well as allow those that are joining in groups to have any type of sidebar conversation that you need. So while participant lines are muted, you are certainly welcome in the meeting room to use the chat pod down the left-hand side of your screen if you have any questions or comments at any point during the presentation. And we'll hear from our speakers, Paul and Connie, for about 40 minutes, but we'll certainly save some time at the end to allow for some discussion at that point, and we'll bring questions forward then. All of our webinars are being recorded, and we post them online within about a week to the Niagara Knowledge Exchange, and we'll put a link up in the chat pod in just a bit. I encourage you to check out past webinars that we've hosted. But certainly this link as well will be emailed to you as someone who has registered for the webinar. We'll email you the link as well as a PDF of the slides. And we encourage you to forward that on to maybe any other colleagues who may have had to miss the presentation today. So I'll pass it over now. As I said, we have two fantastic speakers on, Paul Connor and Connie McCutcheon from Niagara Region. And I'll turn it over to you, Paul, to take us away.
Thank you. So I'm Paul Connor. I'm Economic Research and Analysis Manager for Niagara Region's Economic Development Division, and it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Connie McCutcheon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Connie McCutcheon. I also work at the Region with Paul, and I'm a Senior Business Analyst with Corporate Services.
So we'll just jump right in if we can. Let's see. There we go. Slide advance. Okay. Can you advance the slide for us, Sarah? Very good. Okay, so this is the Niagara Trade Zone, branded some initiative of Niagara Economic Development. It is not as simple as it sounds, but at the end of the day, I hope we will achieve some clarity here. So next slide. So the definition, Niagara's designation as a foreign trade zone point does not circle us with any kind of fence within which things can happen that cannot happen outside but in other parts of Canada. But what does happen is we get the attention of senior managers at all levels of government who come together every quarter to talk about problems and opportunities that face exporters, both with respect to the programs that they themselves offer, the regulations that they must subject businesses to, and to the world beyond. So it is quite a lively meeting every time we get together. We've gotten together twice so far. We have members of the list, which I'll go into later, but really everyone who touches and supports companies and people who want to bring stuff into Canada or leave Canada, they're at the table for Niagara businesses and for Niagara employers. So they bring a lot of different things to the table. They bring financing, insurance, support services like research, because you have to do your homework before you're going to go overseas, educators even. We have representatives who are with Niagara College and who are with Brock University at our table. Mentorship and advice, that's our private sector steering committee. They're willing to talk to businesses who want to increase their comfort level and really want to talk to another business person. And the whole point of this is to increase international trade by companies across the region's municipalities, all 12 of them, and across the region's industries, of which we have more than people might think, including agri-food, digital media, professional services, and, of course, manufacturing. Next slide. So the value of the foreign trade zone point, is to serve as not just a single window on government services for business, not just to provide advice to businesses by businesses, but to really develop a community among the businesses in Niagara that conduct international trade. So a community of practice, and this is something that I'm a personal believer in and have been working with in other concepts for many years now. That's kind of what I bring to the table here. They share tips. I mean, you can read a form, but you don't really understand it until you've been all the way through the form, filled it out, and gotten feedback. And so we can accumulate that tacit knowledge, that expertise, share it with one another most readily around this table and around the mechanisms that we're building, and really just, make businesses really well informed about how they can get on to the next step, reduce the risk, reduce the fear of taking that next step. Because going overseas, let's face it, that's a big step to take. Now, I also talk here about better access to all export help. There's more than people realize out there. There's federal agencies, there's provincial agencies, the regional government itself. We engage in trade missions overseas. My colleague just got back from one. We're really trying to increase employment, investment by, finding markets for our goods overseas and finding investment into our economy from overseas. And let's face it, taxes, duties, these are kind of dry and complex subjects. So if we can sort of reduce that barrier and increase, information and comfort level with tax and duty relief, then we are matching the offer that trade zones offer in, say, Buffalo or Niagara Falls, New York, or overseas. And then we're on an even playing field with them, and that's all we're talking about here.
Paul, that's really helpful. Can you tell us really what this means for a business in a practical sense? Maybe go back to the definition a bit and explain, if I'm a business in Niagara, how does this impact me?
Okay. Well, if we can go to the next slide. Yep. The thing is that in other free trade zones around the world, you're basically surrounded by barbed wire. And within that barbed wire, the paperwork is easier. That's all that it means, because it doesn't make sense to pay taxes and duties on things you're importing if you're just going to export them again. That's all. If you're bringing them in to sell in Canada, well, then you're going to pay your fair share. If you're buying stuff in Canada and selling overseas, well, then again, the fair share will be paid. But if it's totally about flow through and about just adding your service or your value to something that's just passing through, then why draw on the working capital? Why draw on your accounting expertise to conduct all these unnecessary transactions when it simply isn't necessary? But more than that, it's about the comfort level, because there's more to importing and exporting than filling out customs forms and paying taxes and duties. I mean, you really want to get to know people in other markets. You want to know, the opportunities and also the risks. Let's be fair, there are risks anytime you go someplace new. And, we can make that so much easier just by putting you in touch with the right people and having that evocative conversation in a way that paper never can satisfy. Now, the core of this program, if we can go to the next slide. Yep. The core of this program is actually 5 programs offered by Canada Border Services and Canada Revenue Agency. And as I said before, they mirror the free trade zones offers abroad. Duty relief, duty drawback if you've already paid the duties and you didn't need to, customs bonded warehouse so that you can bring stuff in, minimally mess with it, like paint it or repackage it or break it down into smaller packages or whatever, and then send it on. And that's similar to what Export Distribution Center and Exporters of Processing Services can offer. Now, there's little detail differences with Exporters of Processing Services and Export Distribution Center. And just for fun, I'm going to go into that for a minute. If you are processing stuff that you don't own, then you're qualifying. Let's take a practical example. You're doing warranty work on vehicles. You don't own the vehicles. You do a little work on them. You send them back out. Why pay taxes and duties? So you see there's an opportunity for regional employment and investment to increase by taking advantage of these programs so that you can just take stuff and work on it and then pass it along. And all we want to do is save on that working capital, which is the most precious resource financially a business has, and unnecessary transactions. Now, for the lay people in the audience, I'll explain. Working capital is the amount of money that you have in your bank account to spend on day-to-day things. Basically your current assets minus your current debts. So that is something that usually is constrained with a business, and BDC and EDC, who sit at our table and even presented to us yesterday about their programs, they want to make it as easy for you to keep that as possible, as do we all, because you can grow and grow and grow as a business, but if you run out of working capital, you're done.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. Earlier you talked about business support services a bit. Could you dive into that? In Niagara, I think we have quite a bit available to us as an FTZ.
That's correct. Now, these programs, again, they're available all across Canada. If we can access the next slide. Very good. These programs, as I said, they're available all across Canada. Niagarans don't get special treatment, but what they get is more efficient access because they're all sitting around the same table and giving each other the tacit knowledge and giving businesses that sit around the table the tacit knowledge. And, businesses will be invited to these meetings, and we're happy to have them because we need the feedback. This is a two-way street. But back to the services. If you have a specific good that's crossing the border that is being, blocked or being treated with some sort of special consideration because it's perhaps just unfamiliar to the border folks, then you can apply for a specific exemption from Canada Border Services, and we will facilitate that through the task force. And that way, business can happen, naturally, as long as, the usual considerations of security and safety are satisfied. There's no reason to bounce around the bureaucracy trying to figure out who to talk to first. We'll take care of that for you. Can export. If your business has never exported anywhere before, you might get matching dollars for many activities that will help you build your export marketplace, like going to trade shows, developing marketing materials, that sort of thing. Can export is a big thing for Global Affairs Canada that they're promoting, and they're on our task force, and they are actually helping us out by letting the world know, helping us let the world know about Niagara's trade zone. So in return, we're letting people know about this program. Now, an interesting thing that we're doing here that I don't think any other trade zone in the world is doing is we're plugging into our post-secondary institutions big time. We have, as I said before, representatives, people who work at Niagara College and people who work at Brock University who have joined us in their business capacity but provide that window on the graduates who come out of the International Business Program or the MBA program, and they can be plugged into business through co-op stints or internships or even new graduate hires. Because small businesses, which I must remind everybody is 98-99% of the economy here in Niagara and in fact across Canada, small businesses just don't have the bandwidth to say, I'm going to start doing my research on how to export and I'm going to start a whole export business line. You have to get that extra bandwidth. You have to plug it in, and this is a way we can do it in a low-risk way, and it's been done other places like University of California in Los Angeles, and they will often be subject to some sort of subsidy or support or just be available to you, and you can sort of kick the tires, test the waters, see if you can take your product abroad with the help of these graduates and these students from Niagara College and Brock University. Now, BDC and EDC, who presented to our task force yesterday, they're about the money. BDC is all about entrepreneurship, all about small business. They will give you loans for working capital. They will give you loans to acquire property. They will give you loans to go abroad. EDC, same thing, plus EDC also has insurance. Say you want to make sure you're dealing with a new business overseas for the first time, and you want to make sure that you're going to get paid. Well, you take out insurance against the risk that maybe you might not get paid. Most of the time you do, but EDC is there for you, and they even have a web-ready tool for the small businesses and the simple needs that you can get your insurance in just a couple of minutes. They've made it so much easier. And part of our story here with the trade zone. It's just letting people know that these things are happening and that they're making it easier for business and making it easier to understand all around. Ontario has export support programs as well, and those are often channeled through the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, but now there's a new Ministry of International Trade, and that's an Ontario Ministry of International Trade. And so you'll see a new focus on gaining foreign investment and gaining foreign markets for Ontarian businesses' goods. And so they'll help you with hiring an export manager, with attending trade shows, and with doing research. And we have a new member on our task force from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. She's situated in Guelph, and she came down for the meeting yesterday. And I don't think I need to explain to anyone who's from Niagara how important agri-food is to our economy here. So we made sure that that representative was on our task force and could address regulatory questions about crossing the border with food, both in and out. We had one recently that sort of inspired us, where they were asking if they could import something and work on it and then export it again. Well, sadly, the answer was no, because our ever-vigilant regulators are making sure that our ecosystems are protected. But they got a quick answer, and then they could move on. And so that's some of the examples of the other accessible services through the Foreign Trade Zone point.
That's super. Again, Paul, that's great information. How would I find out more if I wanted contact information for them, or is there a website? How would I get started?
Well, we don't want to be centralized about this. As I said before, this is a community of practice. And one of the advantages of living in a regional municipality with 12 other local area municipalities is some of them have their own economic development offices, and they are equally aware. They each have the manual for the Foreign Trade Zone point, and they attend these meetings, and they are aware, and they can be your first stop in Welland, in Fort Erie, in St. Catharines, in Niagara Falls, and in Port Colborne, yes. So if you approach any of these economic development officers, my colleagues on Team Niagara, they'll be able to tell you how to get started. We also have a website, www.niagaratradezone.ca. If we could just advance to the next slide. Very good. And we have a hotline. You call 905-980-6000, extension 3728, and if I'm in the office, you will hear the dulcet tones of my voice. But you can also leave a message, and we will turn you around as quickly as we can, because we are measured on that kind of performance as well. Now, if you're just curious about it from a research or communitarian point of view, I'm happy to help, because I'm the Economic Research and Analysis Manager, and I understand how important it is for business, for not just business, but everyone to understand and support this initiative. So, we're an open book. If you are a business, we will ask you for your contact details. We'll ask you for your size, the industry you're in. We'll try and get your NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System, so we know exactly, what your business is, and establish your needs. All these programs and all these services and all this peer-to-peer contact that I spoke of previously can satisfy the various needs that you have. And we'll just have a little interview, and we'll establish, what do you need first? Where are you coming from? Where do you want to go? And then, because we have the book, because we have the meetings, because we have all the experience of working with one another on this task force, we should be able to help you more quickly than any other region in central Canada, because there are foreign trade zones in other parts of Canada, but we should be able to help you more quickly than anybody else to get started on business exporting.
Oh, that's great. So if I look at the landscape across Canada, who are we competing against in our foreign trade zone?
The short answer is we're not competing with anybody. There are 6 other foreign trade zones in Canada, but each of them has a unique combination of strengths, of industries, of positioning. And so they are actually very, very different entities, and we've received very good support and cooperation from a number of them already. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you the map. Yes, so we have Port Alberta in Edmonton and the Calgary Region Inland Port, and they were approved last August simultaneously just before the election. We have Regina's Global Transportation Hub, and as you can tell from that, that is pretty much a transportation-focused endeavor. I'll come back to that in a minute. We have Centerport Canada in Winnipeg. They're the oldest. They were the first. They were the forerunners. They were incorporated as a nonprofit by a provincial statute, and that means that basically we look to their example both to what to do and where we can distinguish ourselves. And so they've been around since about 2009, actually. And then over to the East Coast, we have the Halifax Gateway, and obviously taking advantage of Halifax's status as a major port. And we have Cape Breton's Regional Municipality FTZ point, and they're trying to develop a port as well, because as you can see from the map, they would be closer to Europe than almost anybody else in Canada with a port. And then you have us, the Niagara Trade Zone, the very first foreign trade zone in Ontario. And we trade on our unique features here. We have the manufacturing sector that built up around the hydroelectricity of the Niagara Falls area. And then we have agri-food sector. We have extensive transportation infrastructure. We have Highway 406, 405, 420, and the QEW, also known as Highway 451. There's a little insider knowledge. And then we have two Class 1 railways, and we have the Short Line Railway, and we have the Welland Canal, on which you can do some transshipment of goods. You can do over-dimensional and bulk cargoes at either end of the canal. And so all of that was in our application to the Government of Canada, to FedDev Ontario, I should say, the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, who processed and approved our Foreign Trade Zone point application. All of this went into ensuring that they approved us as a viable choice for a foreign trade zone point.
Thanks, Paul. How far could I drive a truck with goods? I'm just curious what the distance would be, what the reach into the same maybe the U.S. market would be.
Well, that's a very good question. We have a very central location in Niagara. I'm sure everyone's aware, but in specific terms, a trucking shift, I believe in Ontario it's 13 hours, don't hold me to it, and in the U.S. it's 11 hours. And that puts a significant radius within our reach. One trucking shift and you're reaching 50% of the Canadian population and 50% of the United States population. That's huge. That's like almost 200 million people.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Thanks, Paul. I'm curious as to who actually sits on the Single Window Task Force.
Well, if we go to the next slide, you'll have their titles, but I'll talk a little bit about each one of them. So on the government side, we have a number of federal representatives, as you can imagine. We have Transport Canada, and we're looking forward to their presentation early next year about what they bring to the table. They apparently have a lot of information from analysts and inspectors on what's happening with transportation, how long it takes to get from A to B, and all the various modalities of transport. We have what was formerly known as Industry Canada is now known as Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, and they have many different branches, and we have a nice young lady sitting on our committee from Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, and I could not do justice to the different programs that they bring to bear, but she is there to represent all of them. We have Global Affairs Canada, which provided Niagara recently with funding for marketing the Foreign Trade Zone point around the world. They have an investor services branch from which the marketing comes, and they also have the Trade Commissioner Service. Now, if you've done a bit of homework, that's the table stakes here. If you've done a bit of homework as a business, maybe with the help of one of those students I was talking about, or one of those recent graduates, and are looking to get into a foreign market, there are trade commissioners all around the world representing Canada there for you. Next, we have Canada Border Services Agency and Canada Revenue Agency. And as I said before, they are the core of this because they have the 5 tax and duty relief programs that I very briefly described, because, again, I could not do justice to all the details. But they sit at this table because they will get the questions day to day about customs bonded warehouses and how to apply to become one, or how to get a specific good exempted at the border, or how to deal with U.S. Customs or any other customs agency around the world. And then we have Export Development Canada and Business Development Bank of Canada. Now, I've gone into their role a little bit, and we have a couple of presentations from them yesterday where they talked about really there's so much financing and insurance that these two folks bring to bear. They do not want to take your personal property as a lien on your loan. They do not want to impact your working capital. In fact, they want to grow your working capital so that you as a business can grow. They're just really great folks, and they will be the enablers when you have that plan, when you've done your research, when you've got the relationships in the foreign market. Well, then the next thing is you have to ramp up your production, and that's where they come in. They can help finance that. And then, as I said before, we have Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and they also have marketing programs. It's not just about regulation and food safety with them, although that is a very crucial component both coming in and going out. It is also about their specific marketing programs that can be brought to bear on behalf of agri-food businesses, of which Niagara has so many. And then we have the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Growth, and our representative from Ontario who sits on the task force has actually convened a whole team across different ministries in the Ontario government ready to help businesses with specific inquiries. And we're fairly wide-ranging. We will, of course, in the initial interview with business, establish if you need research assistance, if you need HR assistance, if you need financing or insurance, or any of those things. But the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Growth and their colleagues in international trade can often help with matching funds for specific initiatives where a business is going overseas to a particular trade show or hiring an export manager. And then there's us. There's Connie and I, and my director, David Oakes, at Niagara Region, and Niagara Region Economic Development. Niagara Region Economic Development already conducts trade missions. We already help businesses that want to expand or locate industrial property in Niagara. And in short, it makes sense for us to be at the table, not just because we helped apply for and organize this, but we ourselves provide very many solutions to businesses that will import and export from Niagara. And I would be remiss if I did not mention our colleagues in the economic development offices of the local area municipalities, each of whom are equally briefed or will be equally briefed on the foreign trade zone point and can treat with their clients directly on the subject as an expert and can refer just as any of us can. As I said before, this is not a centralized effort, and everyone is able to pitch in. And even you in our audience today, now that you have learned about the foreign trade zone point and hopefully can access the packaged webinar when this is done, you too can be something of an ambassador for this, we hope. And then let me jump over to the right side of the slide and talk about our private sector members. Now, the federal government made very sure that we got private sector members for this. This has to be by business and for business in a certain way. And so we wanted a cross-section of all the different sectors, as you'll see on the slide. We wanted a cross-section of the different municipalities, and we wanted to make sure that they are actually passionate about this topic and about growing Niagara's economy as a whole. And they have done quite a bit for us already. They've helped condition our expectations for the manual, and they've talked to businesses that have been interested in coming to Niagara, like life sciences businesses, for instance. We have someone from the life sciences sector on our Foreign Trade Zone Task Force. Yes, it may surprise some people to know that we're not just about the making of stuff or the transport of stuff. A lot of free trade zones and foreign trade zones around the world, with all respect to them, that's what they focus on. But we're including the innovation sector, we're including the entrepreneurship sector in Niagara in this great endeavor.
So, Paul, can you help us understand who might benefit from a FTZ point?
Okay. On the next slide, I have a bit of a laundry list there, but this is very high level. Importers and exporters, obviously. Manufacturers and processors, obviously. The people that bring stuff from A to B. And, of course, all the sort of participants in the supply chain, I think, is the best way that I can put it. And it would not do justice to that supply chain if I just said hotels and convention centers, although that, they are an important link in the whole international trade phenomenon. The fact of the matter is that everyone can benefit from a foreign trade zone point. In Niagara, you have an economy that is really connected to the world economy, is benefiting from trade with the U.S., benefiting from trade overseas. About 10% of our businesses are engaged in international trade. And obviously the whole point of this is we want that number to grow, and we want each of them to grow. And so no matter where you are in Niagara, you can probably find some relevance, probably find a touch point, a little bit of a groove or an anchor with the foreign trade zone point, and hopefully be able to speak positively about it. We should not forget, and this is where I go back to my economic research and analysis role, my primary role with economic development. We should not forget that we track the trade of goods across borders. It's harder to track the trade of services, but remember that most of the economy is services, and Canada is a trusted provider of services around the world, and we are there for them as well. So I hope that starts to answer that question.
Oh, definitely. So earlier you talked about the trucking distance. So overall, why Niagara? Why was Niagara chosen for the FTZ?
Well, we had to do, if you'll see the next slide, we had to do a fairly extensive application to the federal government, and we had to talk about all the different attributes that Niagara can bring to bear to help businesses import and export. And you'll see some of them listed here. I mean, we have 5 border crossings. We have that manufacturing cluster of 1,800 businesses that technically involved in manufacturing, according to our most recent data analytics exercise. We have the transportation infrastructure that I described previously, and I doubt I even did it justice. I mean, if you go to other regions of Ontario, like where I'm from, Thunder Bay, we have our highway. We have the border crossing about a half an hour, 45 minutes away. We, of course, have the port at the lakehead. But Niagara has all of this in quantity and the positioning to go with it. I think it's really the positioning and that readiness, and that's the last point on this slide, the business-government consensus in support of foreign trade zone point as an application to the federal government. All 12 municipalities and the region and the Ontario government and all these different departments of the federal government had to agree that Niagara was the place to have Ontario's first foreign trade zone point. And that consensus, which has been sustained and continues to this day, that cooperation, that collaboration, dare I say, that sees everyone on the same page and able to represent and be an ambassador for this foreign trade zone point, that's been powerful in ways that I can't even describe.
Thanks, Paul. Could you go over who's involved with the project?
Well, quite apart from the task force, on the next slide you'll see some of the fine folks who expressed their support in writing for our application. Of course, Niagara Region, this, I should note, is a council strategic priority of Niagara Regional Council. So our chair and our council were championing this as part of our general drive towards economic prosperity since 2014. The same drive that saw GO Transit service announced as being extended to Niagara by 2021 or 23. We have the Niagara Industrial Association. 200 firms are members of that grouping that we work with closely. And we have the Niagara Development Corridor Partnership, which is the 5 economic development offices of the cities of Niagara that pooled their resources to this nonprofit to pursue economic development objectives in concert. We have the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, led by Mishka Balsam, and we have the Alliance Chambers, Welland Pelham, and Niagara Falls Chambers. They also lent their support in writing for this endeavor. And it's been our pleasure, in fact, to deliver seminars and workshops to most of these groups describing the foreign trade zone point and how they can engage with it on behalf of their clients and their members. Well, I think that brings us just about to the end of our presentation. If we go to the next slide, which is the always important contact us slide, I'm going to ask everyone to really, don't be shy. Like, give me a call, leave me a message, or go to the website and see what it's all about. Maybe mull this over and see. what I really hope will come out of this is that people will think about growth for themselves in terms of career, because we have these great programs at Niagara College and Brock University that help students become fully certified to help businesses export and import more and thus generate wealth for Niagara. And even in a business sense, not just in a personal career sense, in a business sense, I hope that more businesses will think, oh, I could actually go to the world market with what I'm doing, or even just the market next door in Buffalo or Niagara Falls, New York. The thing is that you never know until you ask. And we always have these assumptions in mind that, they do the same thing everywhere. Well, that's not necessarily true. And you might be surprised to find out what kinds of Canadian products, high-tech ones, low-tech ones, food ones, non-food ones, have achieved great gains overseas. And when 25% of our GDP depends on trade with the United States alone, and another 6%, as I understand it, depends on trade with other countries, and knowing how the world is at the one and the same time becoming more integrated so that things can be made where it makes sense for things to make them, and we believe it makes abundant good sense for a lot of stuff to be made in Niagara if we participate in that open and collaborative world trade system, then it should happen that way. But there are also concerns, and I will acknowledge them, that sometimes this tide can shift and not be in everyone's favor. And what this initiative here is a way to make sure that everyone has the information they need to make the best choices that they possibly can. And we are here as public servants to make sure that everyone, to the extent we can, make it so that everyone wins from this. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
I'm definitely going to check out the website and some of the profiles on there to see the successful stories of some of the exporters that we have in Niagara.
Thank you, Connie. And I think with that, we can throw the floor open to questions.
Absolutely. So thank you, Paul and Connie, for the presentation. I have a question here from Jeff asking, is there an expiration date on the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone? That is there a time at which it needs to be renewed, for lack of better words?
Not for the designation itself, and I believe that the task force will keep meeting as long as we have good and useful work for them to do for our businesses, and as long as they in turn are receiving good feedback from our citizens and residents and our businesses. As far as the marketing program goes, there is something with an expiration date. I believe that we are eligible to receive funds to market Niagara to the world as a foreign trade zone point until the spring of 2018. And one of the things that we're doing is we're tracking our performance. Like, we're actually counting how many companies approach us, where we refer them to, and at the end of the day, down the road, we will go back to them and say, so how well did you do with all of this? And in this way, and this is rather new among foreign trade zone points, in this way, we hope to make the case for all of this to be continued indefinitely, because I am quite sure that the world community of free and foreign trade zones is going to persist and grow.
Awesome. And can you expand, Paul, on ways that businesses in Niagara have already been able to leverage the foreign trade zone?
Well, I have to be careful because I don't want to violate anyone's confidentiality, but I think It's safe to say that General Electric, for instance, cited the foreign trade zone as one of the many reasons they chose to locate in Welland recently with their new brilliant factory that is going to employ at least a couple of hundred people to begin with. Other businesses in Niagara have at least been able to avoid trouble by consulting our experts and making sure they're on the right track. We have had a lot of businesses come and say, oh, I hear you're a foreign trade zone point, so now I'm going to look for some property in Niagara because I would like to be able to engage regularly with your task force.
Right. Let's see here. Linda asks, can a private citizen, not necessarily a business, contact any of the groups mentioned?
I believe so, yes. I would encourage any private citizen to contact me first because well, I'm at the service of the people of Niagara Region as an employee of Niagara Region, and I can bring a lot of context to things with my other hat being Economic Research and Analysis Manager. So I hope that'd be a good first port of call.
Great. Colleen asks, is there a directory for services? My firm specializes in Canadian-U.S. food packaging compliance, or is there a membership?
The membership of the task force is as I described it, and it's on this slide. And the way you access that task force will initially be through the hotline. I have to say that the departments are represented on the task force, but the actual individuals may change from time to time. So just to keep things straight, best thing is to go through the hotline or to go to any of the economic development offices in the local area municipalities.
Great. Jillian says, aside from educational resources, are there tax benefits, duties, or customer relief associated with the Niagara Free Trade Zone for import-export?
Well, as I said, we have access to the Canada-wide tax and duty relief programs that apply if you are importing something from a third country and then exporting it to another country again. So that you're not paying taxes or duties that you're just going to get refunded anyway. That's kind of the core of it. They are available all across Canada, but we like to think that we can provide speedier service and provide more informed service to Niagara businesses this way.
A question here, how is the foreign trade zone affecting overall economic development planning across Niagara?
That's an excellent question. What we're trying to do is really weave it in with all the other great things that our colleagues on Team Niagara are doing. So like I said, each one of them will have the manual, and each one of them can participate in these meetings. So they'll be up to date on the foreign trade zone, the services it provides, the tacit knowledge that it is amassing in the body of its membership, and the businesses that we deal with. There are other specific things like the Gateway CIP program, which, as far as I know, is unique in Ontario and was another thing that General Electric was able to leverage to make its decision to locate in Welland, where you're not paying increased taxes for a period of time after you improve a property that you have bought that is zoned industrial. And so whenever someone inquires about that, they'll know about the foreign trade zone and vice versa. Then there's our trade missions to our target countries overseas that we bring Niagara businesses along with or represent them with. And, of course, we make sure that everyone knows that Niagara is a foreign trade zone point and affords the services of the task force to any business that is seriously looking to locate in Niagara or is already located in Niagara.
Fiona says, surely GE is not a small or medium-sized business, though. They've already been given several million by the Ontario government. How is this helping Canadian exports?
Is that a question? I'm sorry.
I think just your comment, given that context, how would GE and its position in Niagara then be helping Canadian exports?
Well, I think really the most potent way that they're going to help Niagara Region is they have a whole supply chain of companies that provide them with parts or with services, and that supply chain is going to follow them to Niagara, we hope. And so it won't be just GE coming here. It will be a whole panoply of companies, large and small, that follow them here or that are already here and find that they can satisfy GE's downstream and upstream supply chain needs and thus grow employment in the economy. So there's a bit of, I hesitate to use the word multiplier effect as economic research. I don't much like it, but I think it applies in this case.
Right. Any other questions or comments from participants on the phone? Well, I give a bit of a pause. I'm also going to bring up the next slide with some further contact information specifically for our speakers, though I understand, Paul, that you'd encourage people to access you probably primarily through the hotline. Is that correct?
Yes, and now that
Yes.
goes to my office phone, so because I'm often dealing with clients, you may have to leave a message, but I will get back to you. Really, email is ideal because I carry that with me everywhere, and I can usually respond fairly readily to questions that I don't have to reference somewhere anyway.
Great. Another question here. Glad to hear that you're tracking measures of impact. Will you be sharing the results, and if so, in what format?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think Connie and I can both speak to that. I'm going to put this on speaker for a second, maybe, or there we go. So many of you may have heard that Niagara Region's government is tracking performance outcomes. That was the question. The question was specifically, will these results be shared? We actually already share broad brush results, how we're doing, and sometimes not so well, sometimes really well, on the website. And I think, Connie, I'd like to ask you to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Are you referring to our open data?
No.
Oh, the dashboard?
The dashboard.
Because
yes,
I kind of went, my head split in two ways.
That's right.
But yes, we have our performance dashboards on NiagaraRegion.ca, and they're readily available for anybody to check them out.
Yes.
But in terms of data, any data that comes out in terms of metrics can also be shared on NiagaraOpenData.ca.
Yes. I should mention Connie is Niagara's Open Data Champion, and so she's putting in, rightfully so, a plug for all such data sets to be shared, which I would certainly endeavor to do. As long as we're not sharing confidential personal or business information, competitive information, I would like to think that we can go to town on that. And really, when we make the case for the foreign trade zone to continue, that case needs to have the broadest possible support and consensus.
Right. That's great, and a great plug, Connie. Thank you. Another question here. The foreign trade zone seems best positioned to work with businesses selling products, not necessarily services. You spoke a bit to this, Paul, but can you expand a little bit more about the service side?
Well, I think so. I mean, the thing is that services usually are not subject to taxes or duties, so they don't need help in that sense. However, they can often be encouraged with the sort of programs where you're doing your export research or you're getting insurance, perhaps for your servicing contracts, when you're actually rendering services on machinery, for instance. That's a service, not a good. And you can get help with crossing the border, like people or whatever. I like to think, and I'm pretty sure that EDC and BDC both yesterday said that they are just as much about the services and helping finance and ensure and support service exports to the world as goods.
Interesting. Thank you. Jeff comments, thank you to both Paul and Connie. I now have some lecture material for next semester. And I think that's fantastic. It speaks certainly, Paul, to your comments about those on the phone becoming ambassadors as well for this work. Tom asks, has there been a Niagara College FITT graduate connection made yet to a business?
No. We actually just shared the information that would allow that connection to be made in the manual literally yesterday. Dr. Navjot Kara, who is a member of our task force because she's knowledgeable about these matters, she was kind enough to share that information recently. And now it behooves us, as we promote this program in the next year or two, overseas and also among Niagara businesses, to make sure that that's part of the equation. But so far, we've just made sure that we have access to it.
Great. So certainly there'll be some really interesting developments in the coming year.
I'm hoping so, yes.
Yeah.
I personally have had an intern at economic development helping me with economic research, and she was going for her FIT certification. That's kind of how I found out about all of this, and goodness knows I'd recommend. I'd definitely recommend it.
That's interesting, Paul. It certainly speaks to just the value and strengths that networks bring. Just you having that connection with that student then puts you in connection with other information and coming back to your ideas about the community of practice, that that really this task force then is creating that, kind of pulling together the assets in the community in that way.
Yes, it's not necessarily the most tangible thing, but it is certainly quite real. And I know my federal and provincial colleagues appreciate the heck out of it.
Awesome. Another question here, would the ratification of the TPP affect the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone, and if so, how?
That's a very interesting question. I think any trade agreement comes with a certain set of opportunities and challenges. The fact of the matter is, if you want other people to open their markets to you and your goods and services, you have to reciprocate. And then there has to be the trust-building measures to make sure that businesses who feel they've been hard done by have some remedy or recourse. I will say that one of the things I'm looking forward to that I would hope to work on as an economic researcher is finding those specific opportunities on behalf of Niagara businesses. Again, 98, 99% of Niagara businesses, or indeed Canadian businesses, are very small. And so they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to carry this all out themselves. And so I would hope to be in a position to help them doing my work on behalf of this task force.
Great. Mary asks if we can comment further on the community of practice approach.
Well, the thing is, my history is actually more nonprofit than government. I was running Ontario's Angel Investment Network for a couple of years. Really rewarding experience where I got to work with a lot of angel investors and entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs most of the time, sometimes not. So, stereotypes got punctured all along. And but the thing is, what I found our best approach was just get them in the same room and get them to share their war stories, And then they found out they really had a lot more in common. And I'm not talking about the groups, I'm just talking about anybody in that milieu. Entrepreneurs, the individuals, the groups, everybody. Get them in the same room, get them to tell each other the war stories, get them to then sort of open up a little bit, and you find that really you win much more from collaboration than from competition.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I don't see any other questions here, so we'll wrap it up at this point. Thank you to our fantastic presenters today, and thank you to participants who took the time to join us this afternoon. When you do close the meeting room, you'll be redirected to a short survey. I think it's 3 questions long. I really encourage you and invite you to answer those questions to help us at Niagara Connects continue to make sure that we're providing information that you're looking for in this format. And as I said, you will receive a communication within the next week with a link to a recording of this event, as well as a PDF of the slides. And certainly we've heard from Paul that his door, his telephone, his email is always open. So I also echo his comments in terms of encouraging you to follow up with him if you have any further specific questions. He can help answer those. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Take care.